It is 7:43 on a Saturday morning. Marcus is standing in his kitchen in sweatpants, holding a cup of coffee he forgot to drink. The washing machine is running. His youngest is watching cartoons in the other room, and he is staring at his phone, with the kind of stillness that only happens when a number hits you somewhere deep. The headline says the average American at 45 has a net worth of nearly $1 million. Marcus is 45. Marcus does not have $1 million. What Marcus has is a 401k he is genuinely afraid to open, a mortgage with 19 years left on it, and a loan statement sitting on the kitchen counter that he has been walking past for 3 weeks without touching. And right now, in this moment, he is doing exactly what millions of people his age are doing this morning. He is trying to figure out if he is behind or if the number is lying. I am going to tell you something that the financial headlines will never say out loud. The number is lying. But the truth underneath it is not comfortable either. And if you are 45 or close to it, this video is going to show you exactly where you actually stand, what the real numbers look like, why you ended up here even if you did everything right, and what you can still do about it with the time you have left. Stay with me, because this gets real. Let us start with that headline number. According to the most recent Federal Reserve data, the average American household headed by someone between 45 and 54 years old has a net worth of $975,800, almost $1 million. And when most people hear that, one of two things happens. Either they feel like a complete failure, or they quietly wonder which of their neighbors is secretly hiding a fortune. Here is what is actually happening. The word average is doing something mathematically dishonest. When you calculate an average, you take every single net worth, from the person with nothing to the person with everything, add them all together, and divide by the number of people. The problem is that extreme wealth at the top does not just nudge the number upward, it launches it into a completely different atmosphere. The average net worth for Americans aged 45 to 54 is $975,800. The median net worth for the exact same group is $247,200. That is a gap of nearly $730,000 between those two numbers. And the reason for that gap is not that most people are doing well. It is that a small number of people are doing extraordinarily well, and their wealth is pulling the average up like a balloon while the rest of the distribution stays on the ground. The median is the honest number. Line up every 45-year-old in America from the least wealthy to the most wealthy, walk to the exact middle, and tap that person on the shoulder. That is your real benchmark. That is Marcus. And that person has $247,000 in net worth. Not $1 million. Not close to $1 million. $250,000, which sounds decent until you look at what it is actually made of. Here's the part that changes everything. When you hear $247,000 in net worth, the mind naturally pictures savings, investments, retirement accounts, actual money you can do something with. But for the typical 45-year-old in America, roughly 60 to 70% of that entire net worth is locked inside their home. Not in a brokerage account, not in a 401k, in the walls. Take Marcus, median net worth, $247,000. Subtract the home equity he has slowly built up over 12 years of mortgage payments. He is left with somewhere around $85,000 to $90,000 for everything else combined. Retirement savings, emergency fund, investments, the family vacation that keeps getting moved to next year. Everything. That $87,000 is the entire cushion between Marcus and a genuine financial crisis. And here is what nobody says loudly enough about home equity. It is not money. Not in any practical, usable sense. You cannot pay the electric bill with home equity. You cannot cover a medical emergency with home equity. If Marcus wants to access that value, his options are to sell the house and immediately spend most of that money buying somewhere else to live, to refinance and extend his debt further into the future, or to borrow against it at interest rates that would make a reasonable person sit down quietly for a few minutes. The federal data shows something extraordinary. If you strip home equity completely out of the net worth calculations, the national median collapses by nearly 70%. The $250,000 net worth that looks solid on paper does not feel the same way when you realize most of it is a building you live inside. Now let us talk about the retirement account, because this is where the real weight of the situation settles in. Fidelity, which manages retirement savings for tens of millions of Americans, publishes a benchmark that has become the industry standard. By age 50, you should have approximately 6 times your annual salary saved for retirement. If Marcus is earning somewhere around the median household income, that benchmark suggests he should be approaching $700,000 in retirement savings before his 50th birthday. The actual median 401k balance for Americans between 45 and 54 is $60,763. Not $600,000. Not even close to $600,000. $60,000. And when you add every retirement account together, 401ks, IRAs, pensions, everything, the median total retirement savings for this age group sits at approximately $115,000. Still less than 1/5 of where the benchmark says they should be. And approximately 38% of households in this age range have essentially zero retirement savings. Not a small amount. Zero. Nearly 4 out of every 10 families at what should be their peak earning years, with retirement now genuinely visible on the horizon, have nothing saved. If that number landed heavily on you, that is the correct response. But before you conclude that this happened because of bad decisions, I need to show you something. Here is a fact that almost never appears in any financial headline. Between 2019 and 2023, those 5 years that included a global pandemic, a historic stock market run, and the most dramatic housing price increase in modern memory, the 40 to 54 age group was the only age bracket in America that actually lost wealth in real terms. Everyone else gained. Americans under 40 saw their real wealth increase by 49%. Americans over 70 gained 15%. Marcus's generation went down 7%. And the reason is not that this generation made worse decisions. The reason is timing. If you were 30 years old in 2012, you had a full decade of historically low mortgage rates and a roaring stock market ahead of you. Plenty of time and affordable entry points to build real wealth. If you were already 65 in 2012, you had already bought the house and built the portfolio years earlier. You simply had to wait while everything appreciated around you. But if you were 35 in 2012, you had just survived the financial crisis of 2008 with your savings depleted and your confidence shaken. Your wages were slowly recovering. You were probably still renting. And by the time you had saved enough to actually participate, to buy a house, to invest meaningfully, the prices had already multiplied. The entry points that built generational wealth for the people just ahead of you had closed. And they closed at exactly the moment it was your turn to walk through. Nobody sent a warning. The window just shut. Now let us talk about what Marcus actually owes. Because net worth is not just what you have, it is what you have minus what you owe. And this generation carries the heaviest debt load of any age group in America. The average Gen X household is sitting on over $157,000 in total debt. That is roughly 50% more than the national average across all age groups. The highest average credit card balance of any generation, approaching $9,600, at interest rates now averaging above 21%. Read that slowly. The credit card is growing faster than the retirement account. They carry the largest auto loan balances, the biggest mortgages, the highest home equity lines of credit. And here's the one that surprises people. Roughly 1 in 10 people in this age group is still making student loan payments. Sometimes their own loans from 25 years ago. More often, parent loans they took out to help their children through college. Those loans currently carry an interest rate above 9%, with an origination fee on top of that. You cannot refinance them easily. They do not qualify for most forgiveness programs. They simply sit there, compounding quietly on the counter next to the microwave. There is a word that describes what life looks like for a 45-year-old today: the sandwich generation. More than half of Americans in their 40s are currently supporting an aging parent while simultaneously raising children or financially helping an adult child. More than half. And roughly 1 in 5 is doing all three at once: supporting young children, financially helping adult children who have moved back home or need assistance, and managing care for an aging parent. Marcus is one of them. His mother is 72. In the last 2 years, the small signs became impossible to ignore. Last winter, she left the stove on twice in 1 week. She is now in a memory care facility that costs more per month than most people's mortgage payments. Medicare does not cover it. Marcus and his sister divide the cost. His share comes to about $1,400 a month, money that used to go toward retirement. His older son moved back home 6 months ago after a lease ended. Marcus is not charging rent. The guest room still has the same posters on the wall from high school. And his younger child still needs braces, a phone plan, and a childhood that does not feel like a financial emergency. This is not irresponsibility. This is what happens when one generation finds itself financially responsible for the generation above it and the generation below it at the same time. It is structurally nearly impossible to build wealth aggressively when you are paying for 3 generations out of one household income. And here is the quiet hope that a lot of people in this situation are carrying but not saying out loud. The idea that an inheritance is coming, that the wealth transfer will eventually arrive and fix the gap. There has been a great deal written about the roughly $84 trillion that boomers are expected to pass down over the coming decades. And if you are 45 and behind, it is genuinely tempting to do the math quietly in the back of your mind and tell yourself it will probably work out. Here is what the data actually shows. About 68% of that $84 trillion is concentrated in households with over $1 million in assets, which represents only about 7% of all households. The wealth transfer is real, but it is going primarily to people who already have significant wealth. For the median American, the median inheritance from the lower half of the wealth distribution is approximately $9,700, not $97,000, not $970,000, $9,700. And that is before you account for the fact that end-of-life care and extended assisted living costs regularly consume a substantial portion of whatever a parent had planned to leave behind. Every month, Marcus's mother is in memory care. A portion of the inheritance he may have quietly counted on dissolves. This is not anyone's fault. It is simply what the numbers do when you actually follow them to the end. There is one more piece to this picture that most people his age are quietly trying not to think about. The Social Security trustee's most recent report projects that the Old Age Trust Fund will be depleted around 2035. Not eliminated, not abolished, depleted. When that happens, incoming payroll taxes alone would cover approximately 77% of scheduled benefits, which means, without congressional action, everyone receiving Social Security at that point would see benefits cut by roughly 23%. The oldest members of Marcus's generation reach full retirement age in 2032. They arrive at the finish line 3 years before the system hits that wall. 3 years. That is not a coincidence. That is a demographic collision that was visible decades in advance and is now arriving on schedule. So here is where Marcus actually stands on a Saturday morning in 2026. Net worth of about $247,000, most of it in the house he lives in. Retirement savings that are a fraction of where every benchmark says they should be. Total debt that is larger than his net worth. A mother in memory care. A son in the guest room. A daughter who still believes everything is fine. A wife who stopped asking about the vacation. An inheritance that is being quietly consumed by the same facility that is caring for his mother. And a Social Security system that is scheduled to arrive, reduced. That is not a character flaw. That is a generation that got handed the most expensive version of adult life at the exact moment the affordable entry points closed. But here's what I need you to hear before this ends, because I did not build all of this to leave you standing in a kitchen staring at a number. At 45, with 20 years before a traditional retirement age, the compounding window is still real. It is not as forgiving as it was at 30, but it is not closed. If you can increase your retirement contributions by even $300 a month starting now, the 20-year compounding effect on that single change is not small. If you have high interest debt, particularly credit card balances above 20%, eliminating that debt is mathematically equivalent to earning a guaranteed 20% return on that money. There is no index fund on earth offering that. If your employer offers any 401k match and you are not capturing the full match, you are leaving guaranteed compensation on the table every single paycheck. That is the first dollar to protect before anything else. If you own a home and have equity, a conversation with a fee-only financial advisor, not a commission-based salesperson, about whether that equity is working or just sitting is worth having. And if you are part of a sandwich generation household, supporting parents and children simultaneously, giving yourself permission to establish basic financial boundaries is not selfish. It is survival. The median 45-year-old in America is not behind because they failed. They are behind because the cost of being alive, raising children, caring for parents, servicing debt, and trying to build a future simultaneously has compounded faster than wages. The benchmarks were written for a different economy. That does not make the gap disappear. But it does mean the story you have been quietly telling yourself about what the numbers say about you as a person deserves to be reconsidered. Dave stood in his kitchen for 11 minutes, staring at a number that was never accurate. The real number is harder, but the real number is also the only one worth working with, and you still have time to work with it. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe and share. I'll see you in my next video.